Welcome back to Sheet Metal is Fun. Today we're going to take our funnel one step farther and we're going to add a collar to each end. There's the 6-inch end. Here's the 4-inch end. We're going to add a collar on both ends and turn it into a transition. I think you're going to like this one. Come on inside. Welcome back to Sheet Metal is Fun. We've made a funnel, and tonight or today, depending on what time it is where you're at, we're going to add a collar on each end, turning it into a transition. So what we have here is we used the funnel that we made last time, and I added a 6-inch collar to one end. That's one of the things we're going to do tonight. And we're also going to add a 4-inch collar to the other end. So this is a vision. So now our funnel becomes a visual aid. So let's set that right there. So we talked about this before, that whenever you have the opportunity, if it's up to you to decide how tall your transition can be, then the shorter you make it, the more likely it is that your apex is going to end up on the piece of metal that you found behind the shear. So what we have here is, let me grab my pen. So we've determined we're going to make a 6-to-4 taper, but we could draw the entire taper. We could project this line up, that line up, and where those two lines intersect, that would be our radius. But we don't need to draw the entire cone. We can draw half the cone. Let me show you where half of it is right here. I'm going to try to do this with the least amount of glare possible. So this is half of our cone. It's a 4 to 6. So we all understand this is a 2. This is 3. 3 is half of 6. 2 is half of 4. So we've drawn half of a side profile. Now I like to start with a 1/2-inch line in from the edge of the metal. So we're going to take our scribe. We're going to make a 1/2-inch line. Now we're going to take a straight edge from that point to this point, and it's going to come up and it's going to meet here at this apex. From that apex, we are going to take our dividers that we keep right here next to our heart, like a letter from home. We're going to put one end of our dividers at the apex, the other end at this part of the side profile. Here we go. And we are going to drag our divider and hold the metal. Now we're going to move up to this one, keeping our other part of our dividers at the apex. Just go back and double check it. You never know when in the adjustment you may have moved and thrown everything off. Now we're here. We're going to go ahead and make this line. As you can see, I've already made this line, but we're going to go ahead and make it in here for clarity. All right, now we are going to reach into our hidden compartment. There it is, tape, ruler. Yeah. Reach over here to our screwdriver that we turned into a scribe. Now come on back in nice and close. So we're going to go right back to the point where we're at the half of our profile. And we've only drawn a half because that's all we need. Really all we needed was this distance and this distance. So we didn't need to draw the whole profile. So we're going to start at this point and make a line beginning at the apex back to this corner. I like to use a scribe because it makes a very fine line, and then if I ask you to cut this out, you don't have to ask me which side of the line would you like to cut it on. Let's say instead of a scribe, I used that felt marker, and I told you watching my spelling here. I told you to cut it on this line. Without further instruction, you wouldn't know that I mean this side of the line, this side of the line, or the middle of the line. So that's just one more variable that we're going to eliminate by using a scribe. The other thing nice about a scribe is it doesn't use ink. You don't have to wait for it to dry. And if it was a pencil, we don't have to ever sharpen it. So let's go back. So we've swung two radiuses here. One starting at the apex down to the bottom of the transition, one at the top of the transition, and back to the apex. And you may not be able to see this line, but we just scribed it along here. Now what we're going to do is the base of our transition is 6 inch. That's a 6 inch diameter. We're going to take 6 times pi, 3.14, and that equals 18 7/8. So that is going to give us our stretch out. Sometimes we'll call it SO, but we're going to call it stretch out. So beginning at this point where our fitting begins, we're going to begin here, and we're going to measure right on top of that line, and we're going to make a mark at 18 7/8. This is where the steel ruler is nice. This is very difficult to do with a wooden ruler. All right. So I'm going to put one part of my ruler on there. And since I've already marked it when you guys weren't looking, I've already marked it at 18 7/8. Let's go ahead and circle that. There's the 18 7/8 line. And from that 18 7/8, since it's a taper, all these lines have to return back to the apex. I want you to come in nice and close here, because here's something that's very critical. We're going to go to this line that's 18 7/8, and we're going to go back to our apex, and let's just make a line. So one of the things, what we've done just now, we just drew in this line from our established point back to our apex. That gave us our stretch out. You'll see here where I wrote measure. We have to measure this distance. That distance is 6, because that's our diameter, times pi, 3.14. It goes much farther, but we don't really need that for what we're doing. This is going to work great. So then we've returned back to our apex. Now the one on the inside, we don't even have to measure that. The reason we don't have to stretch out this measurement is because from this established radius point, if we draw this arc, that is going to be a 4 inch. So we could, if we wanted to, we could begin at this point, do the math, 4 times pi, and if we stretched it out, it would be right there. But as it says here on the diagram, we don't have to measure that one. We're going to get this one for free, because we've already measured the outside, and then we returned back to our apex. And when we swung this arc, this dimension is automatically going to be correct. We get it for free. We didn't have to measure it. So we touched on this last time. So now here is our cone. Here's the taper, the transition that we're going to make. Now what I want you to do is we're going to add a seam on here, so that when we put it together, it overlaps a 1/2 inch, so that we can make the attachment, we can make the seam. Now we did this, I did this on the last one, but if you didn't watch the last video, this is very important. We're going to use a 1/2 inch lap. 1/2 inch lap is very common. It gives us plenty. We don't need more than that. So I'm going to measure from this established line where we went from the end of our measured arc back to our apex, and we're just going to add a 1/2 inch so that we can make this seam. We're going to add that 1/2 inch to the end of our fitting. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to mark a 1/2. Again, using the Scribe, it makes a nice small line. We're going to go here, a 1/2. And now we're going to connect those two lines so that that's going to add a 1/2 inch to the end of our pattern. One of the downsides to using a Scribe is a lot of this metal has been slid across the table or in and out of the rack or off the back of the shear, and it will have scratches in it. So it would be very easy for us to see the wrong Scribe line. And you see, here's what I've done. See where I said seam, don't cover? There's our fitting. Now look, I've just covered it up. So I want you to make sure you don't cover up your fitting. We're going to come over here. We're going to find these two 1/2 inch lines that we've marked. Now I can see my fitting, and I can see the 1/2 inch that we've marked. And we're going to go ahead and scribe that line. I'm going to see if I can make it a little darker so it's readable. There's the 1/2 inch that we've added to the end of our fitting. If we covered the fitting, I might think, oh, there's my scratch and there's my other one. And then I made a line right here. And look, it's not in the right place. It's not, we didn't add a 1/2. We added an inch here and we added 7/8 there. So don't cover your fitting with your ruler. Let's go ahead and take that off so that doesn't try to trick us. All right, at this point, let's go ahead and cut this out. Your red snips go in your right hand, because whenever you're cutting, you always cut in front of your body. This is your zone where your muscles work the best, your eyes work the best. You're right in front of it. This is less favorable, right? So this goes in your right hand. The greens go in your left hand, and they cut this way. So we call these rights because they go in your right hand, but they actually cut to the left. These are lefts, so if somebody said, hey, pass me the lefts, they're going to want the green handle. And these cut to the left. Again, that puts your project in front of you. This is where this is your zone right here. You're going to cut this way with your left, or you're going to cut this way with your right. Always keeping your project in front of you. All right, here we go. Let's go ahead and cut this out. So one of the things I'm going to do is you never go to the end of your snips. I'm going to do this. We would never want to do that. Look, I don't have to tell you what a hazardous situation we've created for ourselves here. And even if you tell yourself, oh, I'm just going to be careful. I know I'm laying a trap for myself, but I'll just keep an eye out. Don't lay traps for yourself. Do everything you can. We're just going to get rid of this whole train wreck right here. Don't lay a trap for yourself. Give yourself the best opportunity for success. So what I'm doing is I have my project over here, and this is the drop. We've talked before about the 85-15 rule. 85% of the energy that goes into cutting actually performs the cut. Somewhere around 15, well, somewhere around 85, and then again somewhere around 15. Half of the 85 goes to the cutting, and the other 15 goes to the spreading, because you can't move your snip forward until you spread the material far enough apart to allow you to move forward to continue to make the cut. So look what I'm doing here. I'm letting gravity pull this section down. So this is my drop. I'm letting gravity do the work, the other 15% of the work for me. So we're going to continue to cut this off, and then right before we get to the end, we don't want gravity to drop this on our toes. Gravity is awesome when it's working for you, but man, when it works against you, it's a cruel taskmaster. These are our straights. These are our long straights. So we talked about reds and greens. Reds go in your right hand and they cut to the left. Greens, left hand, they cut to the right. So this way we're always cutting in front of ourselves. These are yellows. They cut straight. These don't cut radiuses very well because they're not intended to cut radiuses. These are made for making straight cuts. We're going to notch these pieces out, and when we do that, we're going to use the yellows. Yellow is for straight. Red is for left cuts or straight. Green, right cuts or straight. Cuts to the right. Goes in your left hand. So we're going to do now, we're going to do the same thing we did last time. Now, one thing I like about the offset snips, this snip has an offset which puts your fingers, in my estimation, it puts your fingers up out of harm's way. You see where my fingers are? I got a little space right here. If I'm making that cut, I've got a little space. Let's go ahead and, I've got some drop off here. Look where my fingers are. They're out of harm's way. If I use the straights, let's make that same cut. Now, look where my thumb is according to this straight edge. Now, this is more difficult to make that same cut, and again, it puts this edge in a place where we don't want it. We don't want it there. We can still do it, but why do it? We're not going to impress anybody if we just bleed all over their shop. That's no fun. So what I'm going to do here, we can use these snips like you just saw. I cut this here, and you can also flip them over. So let's just flip one over and see what that looks like. There's no rule on the snip. The snip doesn't care. But look, it gets my hand out of harm's way. And I'm in awesome shape right here. Let's take our straights, cut this right here. I mean our reds. I already told you reds cut left and straight. Now we're going to come over here and make sure we don't cut our seam off that we added. Here's our fitting, and here we added a 1/2 inch for a seam. There we go. All right, let's go back to the rolls. I want to show you how we're going to roll this up on the slip rolls. All right, here we are at the slip rolls. This is a 3-foot slip roll. The front 2 rolls are geared together. There's a gearbox inside here that these first 2 rolls actually will pinch the material and pull it through. The back roller is an idler. I don't know if you can see that rolling. The back one rolls freely. So whenever we turn the handle, if you look right here, these two rolls counter rotate, which makes them pull the material through. So in a minute, we're going to roll up some collars, but right now we're going to roll up this taper. So what we want to do with a taper is, if we were just going to roll a cylinder through, we want everything to be parallel. But what we're going to do here is this is not a cylinder, it's a taper. So this is just a piece of metal that I bent up. Really, all we need is anything at all that would fit in here. And we want to cause a little bit of friction right here at this seam. And by causing friction on the inside, we're actually going to slow this down, and as it pulls it through, it'll roll it into a cone. So I haven't checked this to see if it's adjusted right, but let's just see what we got. See, what happens is when we're generating friction right here, it's slowing down the inside radius, and it actually rolls it into a cone. So we're close. We're going to tighten up the front a little bit, which is going to grab the material a little more. And then we're going to bring in that idler roll in the back. And the more we bring in the idler in the back, the smaller the radius will become. So let's run it through again, see what we got. So all we're doing here is we're just creating friction at that intersection. Oh, doesn't that sound great? Look at that. By creating friction, we're able to roll it up with one diameter being different than the other. So we could have done this with almost anything. Sometimes you can use a piece of angle iron. Sometimes people use whatever's laying around. But so this is a piece of metal I had, and I just bent it in the box and pan brake. And that way it stays there whenever we need it to. Look at that, rolled up a nice cone. Let's go back to the bench, because what we're going to do now that I showed you how to roll up a cone, we're going to go back and roll the collars, and those are going to be straight, and I'll show you at the same setting what happens without our friction brake in here. Let's go back to the bench and we'll notch that. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to make a transition 6-inch to 4-inch, because that's what we need. And this could be a 6-inch downspout, a rain gutter downspout, and sometimes we have to go down to a 4-inch to get into that underground plumbing. Or we've installed water heaters, because we also do plumbing, heating, and air conditioning. And the old water heater may have a 6-inch vent, and the new water heater or the new furnace may be more efficient and have a forced air draft inducer. So what they do is they'll actually make the vent pipe a little smaller. So sometimes we may need to make a transition from the existing 6-inch in the ceiling down to the new 4-inch that we have for our new equipment. So this could be for a furnace. This could be for a downspout off of a rain gutter. This could also be an air conditioning. A lot of the bathrooms here in the States, they'll run 4-inch to a bathroom. That's a pretty common size. So the one thing I want you to know is whenever we make our collars, now we've made our transition. Whenever you make the collar, make it the size that you need. Make it the size that you need. So we have a 6-inch and we have a 4-inch, and it's critical that you make the collar the size you need. The mistake you can make is you made your transition the wrong size. You missed a dimension, or you cut a line that wasn't your line. You thought it was, and then once you roll it up, you realize it's wrong. The one way you can make that mistake even worse is, now that it's the wrong size, you cut your collar down to match the incorrect dimension on your funnel that you made a mistake on. So you already know the sizes that you need for your project. Just make sure you cut your collars the size that you need, and then if you have to make any differences or any adjustments, you can make them in the transition. So we've allowed ourselves a 1/2 inch lap. Sometimes what we can do, I'm just going to get a little bit closer. We can make, there's our 1/2 inch lap. Let me show you. There's the 1/2 inch lap. That's where we're going to put it. But we could make some minor adjustments here. I can stretch this out. Say I don't have a full 1/2 inch lap, but I made a mistake somewhere, and I can still save this thing by making it, I can expand it and contract it and make this diameter a little larger and a little smaller. We can't do a lot, but we can make a little difference. So instead of a 1/2, maybe we have a 3/4 inch overlap. Or instead of a 1/2, we'll go to a 3/8, and thereby changing this opening size. But only change the opening size to accommodate the appropriate, proper diameter that you need. All right, so what we're going to do here, we're going to make our collars next. We're going to make the 4 inch. So the 4 inch, since we're going to be stretching on our 4 inch, there isn't going to be any notching. So 4 inch we already got, but let's go ahead and put our 1/2 inch lap. So I've scribed a line on here 1/2 inch in from the edge. Now the next one is, we're going to do a hand Pittsburgh here, just in case you guys haven't seen this. It's an 1 1/4 hand Pittsburgh. There's my 1 1/4 allowance. So I've made a line at an 1 1/4, 1 1/4 there, 1/2 inch for our lap. Now we're going to notch this out. The only time you go to the end of your snip is when you're notching. And I really like to notch with straights. I showed you earlier that if you tried to make this cut with the straights, your hand will end up in a bad place. But look, if I'm just notching, my hand is out here in a good, safe spot. So this is going to be our hand Pittsburgh. We're also going to do a machine Pittsburgh. So here we go. Let's do that one. On machine Pittsburgh, the machine can get it done in a 1 inch space. When you make a Pittsburgh by hand, it takes a little more room. So I'm going to turn on the Pittsburgh machine. We're going to run the machine Pittsburgh through. Inch allowance, we're going to run it through the machine. Take a look at that. So this machine has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stations, and each station performs a small fabrication process. It starts out, the first one it might just put a little in it, and then when it gets to the next roll, it might fold it all the way over, and the next roll may kick it back around the other way. But after it goes through all these stations, what you end up with, can you get that in there? I'm going to get it really close. There. Can you see what's going on right there? That's a Pittsburgh. All right. We still there? So now we've shown you how to do a machine Pittsburgh, where if you're going to work in a shop, they're going to have a Pittsburgh machine. But let's say you're working at home and you don't have a Pittsburgh machine. We can't do it with a 1 inch allowance but we can do it with 1.25 inches. Let's go over to the brake and bend up this hand Pittsburgh. The first bend on a hand Pittsburgh is always that 1.25 inch allowance. We have to make this bend first, or else the Pittsburgh is not going to work. So I'm lining up that scribe line with the nose bar. That's the front of the brake. This is the bending leaf. There's our 1.25 inches. We're going to go a 90 up. When this is flat like a table, that's 90 degrees. This is the clamping handle. This is the one that closes down and grabs the material. This is the bending handle. So we're going to open up the brake. Now we've made a 90-degree bend at 1.25 inches. Now we're just going to push this in. Now this is a 1/2 inch bending leaf, so we're bending a 1/2 inch. On this one we got to go all the way over. All the way over till it stops, which in our case is 135 degrees. When it's flat like a table, that's 90 degrees. If you go all the rest of the way over, you're adding another 45 degrees for a total of 135, which is what we have here. That's 135 degrees. Now we're going to flatten that out. Now we're going to push this over. Now we're going to flatten this out. So that's what we have so far. Now we're going to flatten this out. Now we're up to that. We're going to hold this back just off. Get a really close picture of that right there. I don't want to go there. I want to come back about twice the thickness of the material. This material is 26 gauge galvanized. We're going to give that a little kick, somewhere around 45. When the front of the bending leaf is parallel with the rest of the brake, that's a 45. Now I'm going to take that out, flip it over, and I want to go about, let's say, 1/8 of an inch. Now, oh, it's right here. Snake would have bit me. We're going to tap this down just a little bit. And look, we have made, am I too close right there? We've made a hand Pittsburgh that looks the same as our machine Pittsburgh. Let's go see what it looks like compared to the machine Pittsburgh. All right, here's our hand Pittsburgh. Here's our machine Pittsburgh. You gonna be able to get that? Are they gonna be able to see it? This is the hand, this is the machine. You can see the machine is able to fold it and do it a lot more compactly than we were able to do with our brake. The next thing I do whenever I am going to run a Pittsburgh on a collar is let's find a scrap, a piece of scrap. And I'm going to push it into that void. All right, let's go back to the rolls. All right, here we are back to the slip rolls. The front two drive rolls are driven. The back one is an idler. It moves in and out, and that determines the diameter of your project. So this is our hand Pittsburgh. We grabbed a piece of scrap off the back of the shear and tapped it into that void. Now what we're going to do is we're going to roll this up. So since we have 4 thicknesses, we're going to have to back this. We're going to open this gap up a little bit here. All right, we're going to roll this thing up. Now last time we rolled a cone. This time we're rolling a collar. Look at that. Since we've already, yeah, let's go ahead and keep going. So I'm going to bring the back roll in, the idler roll, and the tighter we bring that in, the tighter of a diameter we're going to have. So let's run that through, see what we got. The thing about a slip roll is one end always opens up so you can slide your project off the end. Yeah, there we go. I'm going to go grab another piece of scrap off the back of the shear. Don't go anywhere. Are you still there? Okay, so just like we did on the other one, we're going to put a piece of scrap into the Pittsburgh, because what we're using the Pittsburgh today so don't get yourself in a place where you're trying to force something in there. Let's see. Use a hammer, tap it in. Tapping in with a hammer is way better than trying to push against 2 sharp edges of metal. So I've inserted this piece of scrap into the void of our Pittsburgh machine. All right, let's roll this one up. Isn't that cool watching it come around? So the machine Pittsburgh is a little tighter, so it actually affected the diameter. The diameter is different. So we're going to bring this idler in a little bit in the back. I'm going to run that through again. Open the end up, let it out. Now we have the machine Pittsburgh collar rolled up. Now we're going to roll our 4-inch. So we know these are 6s, so we know we can move this back in. We can tighten up that idler in the back because we're trying to make a really small diameter. I'm going to bring the front, I'm going to tighten this gap right here. So I'm driving the bottom roll up. Here we go. Let's see what we got here. Tightening it a little bit more. One more. Now we're going to open up the end of the slip roll. Look at that. We have a 4-inch diameter cylinder. So with this in place, we were able to roll a tapered cone because of the drag created on the smaller diameter. And now without it, we can roll up a straight collar. Let's go back over to the bench. All right, so we rolled up our 4-inch cylinder, and we're going to go to the line that we put in earlier that we can't see without our reading glasses. Oh gosh, look, there it is right there. Remember, always cut your collars to the size you really need. One of the things that we can also do is to make one fit inside the other. We can crimp one, and whenever we crimp a collar, what we're doing is we're drawing in this circumference. That's the distance around the outside. You already know the shortest line between 2 points is a straight line. So what this is this makes a crimped line, and because it's crimped, it actually minimizes the diameter. So by doing that, these are both 4 inches in diameter, but if we crimp one, we make it smaller so that one can fit inside the other. Without the crimp, one won't go inside the other because they'll both be the same diameter. All right. Now what I'm going to do here, I'm going to spot weld this. This is a handy little welder. There's voltage passing from one arm to the other arm, and anything that gets in the way, anything that gets in between completing that circuit, it heats it up. Actually, if you leave it on there long enough, it would become molten. So what we're doing is we have the focus, the points are very sharp, so that we focus the footprint, the diameter of that transference. So the smaller we have the same amount of energy going through, and the smaller diameter the spot is, the more focused the energy is. So you're going to get a better spot weld, a more reliable, strong spot weld. Now I'm using this small spot welder for here. Because the diameter is so small, I need to be able to get inside there. Just real quick, I want you to walk with me over here. This is Buzz. This is a big spot welder, but look, our diameter is so small, we can't get our small projects into Buzz, but Buzz gets pretty hot. If you're not watching and if you're not careful and you don't have it set right, Buzz will knock holes in your project. That's not good. So this is what you're going to see in most shops. And the one that you see over here is for smaller projects like this. All right, I want to show you what we're going to do next. Oh, you know what? Let's go ahead and put our cone. Let's go to put our taper together. We're going to go to our 1/2 inch line, clamp it. This is that 1/2 inch that we drew on there. You can see it inside there, 1/2 inch lap. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to put a couple pop rivets. Always watch where you keep your hands. Make sure you keep them in a safe spot. So we know we have a 1/2 inch overlap. So if we come from the seam over a 1/4 of an inch, we know that's the middle of the lap. Anytime we're drilling a hole, you always push as hard as you can reasonably push. Grab a pop riveter. right out of our sense of accomplishment. All right, one more of those. Again, make sure you put your hand in a place where you can't drill a hole in it. 1/4 of an inch off the seam. Anytime you're drilling, you always have to be creating shavings. If you're not creating shavings, then you're not cutting. And if you're not cutting, you are generating friction. A byproduct of friction is heat. If you heat this metal, you can actually make the metal harder than it was. So if you're not pushing and all you're doing is generating heat, you're making it more difficult on yourself. So always try to use the smallest amount of revolutions and the most pressure you can reasonably put on. Now, what I'm going to do here is we're going to take our collar, we're going to put on a left glove, and this is similar to the turning machines that you will see in a lot of shops. What I'm going to do is I'm going to flare out the bottom of this collar so it matches our transition. So with my hand, I'm pushing in against the backstop, and I'm wearing a glove so I can let it slip in my hand. So once I create one full revolution and I like everything, I'm going to slowly begin to lift. Lifting a little bit more at a time. So what we're doing here is we're stretching. Can you see the angle that my collar is entering the rolls? And by the collar entering the rolls at that angle, I was able to flare out this end. So what that's going to do is that's going to make it match the taper of my cone. So what we can do now is we have this amount, look at the amount of overlap we have here. It's important that you know how much lap you have so that you know where you can put your rivets. So we're going to push this in here. And then we're going to come in here. Matter of fact, let's do it now. Come on over here to the plywood workbench. Let's put 4 rivets in this. We're going to put one right through the overlap. And all this is going to do is secure that lap a little bit more. Then we're going to go 180 degrees from that one. And then we're going to go 90 from each of those. Now, if this was really critical, we would actually take our dividers and we would lay out the circumference, divide that by 4, and we could step this off. We could step these dimensions off if it were critical. Look at that, boy, we're pretty close. Right? Pretty close. So, since we're going to drill one hole through the overlapping seam of the collar, let's drill also a hole through the overlapping seam of our cone. You know what I'm going to do? Instead of pushing down on this with my hand, I'm going to use a board. Gonna look at it, make sure it's nice and square. Here we go. We just drilled through 4 thicknesses, so it took a little bit longer. And honestly, when I'm making this sort of a hole, I'm not pushing as hard as I want, because what I would do is I would actually spread this out. So we got that hole. And we have, don't go away, we have a malfunctioning pop rivet gun. But look, we're going to keep going. We're going to keep going. Let's go ahead and do, because you might as well watch me go through mistakes too. And then when they happen to you, you won't think you're the man in the moon or the woman in the moon. All right, so now we're going to go 180. We're going to go the opposite of that other one. We're pushing down to make sure we have our lap correct. We're going to go ahead and drill this other rivet out. Look at that, man, I like that. All right, let's see what kind of problem we have here. So far, so good. Let's see if it works this time. Oh, baby. All right. So rather than get bogged down in the one that's trying to take us out to the woodshed, we're going to keep trucking, pushing down here to make sure that I'm out of harm's way with my drill bit. And let's go ahead and put a rivet in it. If we start drilling a number of holes and we don't fill them with rivets, sometimes things can walk around, and then when you go back to fill all those holes with rivets, some of those holes are not going to be where you want them to be. Look at that. We got another rivet in without a problem. I'm feeling lucky. Last hole. All right, let's see what we have gotten ourselves into here. So this part of the rivet is called the mandrel. M-A-N-D-R-E-L, the mandrel. See how the mandrel broke on us? It did set the rivet, it did the job, but then it broke prematurely and part of it got stuck in the gun. But I want you guys to see what happens when things don't go right. So all we're going to do at this point is we're going to drive that mandrel right through the pop rivet. With nothing more than sheer willpower. And let's see. Man, this is really good. You guys are getting a first class training session here. All right. Let's see if I can get this somewhere where I can add a little bit more pow. Ooh, we're close. Man, where else are you going to get this kind of teaching? This whole video is about problem solving, so you might as well watch me problem solve. And that is close. Oh, you know what I think I'm going to do? I'm going to drill a hole in my board. And let's see if we can get that pop rivet right on that hole in our board. I know what's happening here. Yeah, this is awesome. Get my hand out of the way. I'm going to try to wiggle it a little bit. I finally got it to break loose. You see it inside there? There's the opposite end of the mandrel. What happens is in a pop rivet, so now I can go ahead and pull it out. So the way a pop rivet works, if you haven't looked at our pop rivet video, is this ball on the end gets pulled through the sleeve, and then it's engineered to break right here, right where they always break every single time, except during today's video. So our rivet is still good. It pulled the ball through there. We got an awesome rivet. And then the mandrel, M-A-N-D-R-E-L, the mandrel broke off. And so now you just had a chance to watch some everyday problem solving. So one of the things I want to do is try to always give you guys two ways to do something. So let's say you don't have one of these, but you do have a 4-inch collar and a workbench of some kind. I want you to come over here real close, because what we're going to do is we're going to show folks how it can still be done. I've got a little block of wood and a wood table. I want to take 3/8. So I'm going to measure in from the end of the table. There's 3 inches. There's 3 inches. I'm going to screw this block of wood right to the bench. Now what we're going to do, let's see, move over here to this side, and then you won't have to look at the back of my head. Well, you know what, I'll move here. So what we have now is I have a little backstop, and the edge of our collar is hanging over the table. See how we're hanging over a little bit? So you would never do this if you were at a sheet metal shop, if you were working for a living. Let me get that out of your way. You would never do this. But also, I want to make sure that if you guys want to, you can do everything we're doing. So I'm just going to roll this collar along the front of the table. And we're just going to bend a little bit at a time. So what we're doing here is we're actually stretching the metal. Stretching the metal is way easier to accomplish than shrinking the metal. The reason we put the backstop is so we would have a predictable line around the outside of our collar. We're just going to keep going around. We're doing it a little bit at a time. If you try to get too aggressive and do it all with one, it's going to turn the collar into an oval. Coming along nice. So what we did is we flared the bottom of the collar out. So now we have a place. If this was our 6-to-4 transition, now we're right back to a good match. So we could take more time and just keep walking around it and around it. We could get all these little dents. You see these little dents in here? We could keep going and get all of that out. But this was just a demonstration so you could see how could you flare, how could you stretch the bottom of a collar. There you go right there. Now if you wanted to, you could rivet that right to your cone. All right, we got to a really good stopping point right here. This video is going a little long. I packed in so much good information. I want you guys to come back for part 2. Part 2 will finish this up. It's going to answer all your questions. You're going to have a sense of accomplishment, and you're going to be glad that you watched Sheet Metal is Fun. Thanks for coming by. We'll see you on the second half of this lesson.